They say that time can erase everything, but Ethan Cole realized that there are some things that, no matter how many years pass, continue to burn quietly, like a wound that refuses to heal, aching on rainy nights. It was one of those nights. Rain tapped softly on the car roof, sliding down the windshield like the tears Ethan never allowed himself to cry. He sat in his old car, parked in front of Cole's Table, a small diner in a Montana town, the yellow lights casting a glow on the faded sign. This place once meant everything to him. Ethan remembered the early mornings when the scent of waffles mixed with freshly ground coffee, filling the tiny space. He remembered the warmth of the wood beneath his hand as he wiped down the table he had bought from a second-hand market for the first time. He remembered the sparkle in the eyes of the regular customers each time he brought out a steaming waffle, dusted lightly with powdered sugar, paired with a smile as he said, "May your day be as sweet as this waffle." But then time passed. Cole's Table opened more locations, and Ethan found himself in more meetings, sitting on more airplanes than inside his small kitchen. He handed over the management to others, believing that his philosophy would live on, until today, when an anonymous message was sent to Ethan's inbox at 2 a.m. "Mr. Cole, your diner is dying. Come see it for yourself, if you still care." Ethan sat silently for hours, reading that message over and over, a storm brewing in his heart. Images came flooding back, the people who had worked tirelessly beside him, the late nights mopping the floors, the laughter that filled the small kitchen, the children calling his name as they ran past the diner's glass windows. All of it now reduced to a cold, impersonal message, a chilling warning. He broke down, the tears silent, his shoulders trembling lightly, his hand gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Ethan didn't know how the diner had changed, didn't know how tired the people working there had become, didn't know if customers still found joy in the cold waffles served now. But he knew if he didn't return now, he would lose everything. He wiped away his tears and started the engine, the sound echoing in the quiet darkness. The rain kept falling, the wipers dragging streaks of water across the glass, reflecting the wet glow of the streetlights. Ethan wasn't a billionaire. He didn't own a private jet or luxurious mansions. The only thing he had was a small diner, a simple dream of a place where everyone was respected, where food was not just food, but care, kindness, and humanity. That night, Ethan did not sleep. He drove through dark streets, across vast fields, heading toward the diner that once held a piece of his heart. Tomorrow, Ethan Cole would walk into Cole's Table as a stranger. No one would know who he was. No one would recognize the gray hair that had started to speckle his head, or the eyes filled with exhaustion and fragile hope. But tomorrow, Ethan would begin the hardest journey of his life, to reclaim the soul of the place that was once his home, once his hope, once his everything. That morning, the Montana sky was pale gray, mist hanging low over the small streets. Ethan sat in his car, staring at the blurred reflection of the Cole's Table sign on the glass, his heart pounding, a tremor of fear and anticipation in each beat. He wore a worn baseball cap, thick-rimmed glasses, a plain grey jacket, and old, dark shoes. In the rearview mirror, Ethan Cole, the man who once stood in the kitchen of his first diner, who once laughed as customers took their first bite of a waffle, who once wiped every drop of water off the floor, now looked like a man who had endured many sleepless nights. He took a deep breath, hand resting on the door handle, feeling his heartbeat drum like a warning before stepping out. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. No one smiled to greet him. There was no buttery scent from a fresh waffle like before, only the smell of stale oil and burnt coffee. The wooden tables were scratched, the salt and pepper shakers sticky, the floor spotted with stains. Ethan's eyes landed on a young woman wiping down the counter, her hair tied hastily, dark circles under her eyes, her hands moving quickly over the surface with a worn rag, but her eyes revealing a deep, exhausted despair. She didn't look up when she asked. "One or two," Ethan quietly replied. "Just one." His voice was raspy, sounding strange even to himself. "Sit anywhere you like." Her voice was empty. Ethan walked slowly past the empty tables, choosing a corner near the window. He set his backpack on the chair, sat up straight, took a deep breath, and let his eyes scan every detail: the cracks in the tile, the dim light bulb, the coffee stains dried on the table. This place had once been his second home. Behind the counter, a young server with messy hair and a wrinkled uniform came out. His name tag, pinned crookedly on his chest, read Logan. Logan looked at Ethan, frowning. "What do you want?" Ethan glanced at the menu he knew by heart, pretending to read it. "I heard the waffles here used to be really good." Logan smirked. "Used to be? Old man." Ethan's heart tightened, but he managed a weak smile. "I'll have a waffle, extra strawberries, and a black coffee." Logan didn't write it down, just nodded. "All right." As he walked away, Ethan noticed Logan quickly stuffing his phone into his pocket, his worn-out shoes dragging lazily across the floor. In the kitchen, Ethan saw Luis, a heavy-set cook, sweat beading on his forehead as he flipped a piece of seared meat with a greasy spatula. Luis glanced over at Logan. "Another waffle. Just use the old mix and add some water." Logan chuckled softly. "The old man won't know the difference." Luis snorted, pulling out a near-expired box of waffle mix from under the counter, dumping it into a bowl, mixing it with cold water with one hand while scratching his head with the other, not bothering to wash his hands. Ethan saw everything, a chill running down his spine. He remembered how he used to carefully whisk the batter, sifting the flour to a fine texture, checking the oven's temperature so the waffles would turn golden, releasing the warm scent of butter and milk. Luis poured the batter onto the griddle, the waffle puffing up but burning around the edges, the scent of cheap fake butter clinging heavily to the air. Luis placed the waffle on a plate, tossing a handful of frozen strawberries on top before drenching it in thick syrup. Logan brought the plate to Ethan's table, dropping it down hard, his voice cold, the signature waffle from Cole's table. Ethan looked at the plate, smelled the burnt edges, the raw batter, the cheap butter. This was not his waffle. Ethan didn't pick up the fork. He looked up and caught Logan's eyes staring at him, a gaze filled with challenge and exhaustion. In that moment, Ethan saw a painful truth. This diner had become a lifeless place, losing the soul he had once poured his heart into creating. He took a deep breath, letting go of the table's edge, watching the pale morning light streaming through the dusty window, telling himself, "I will save this place, even if I have to start from this ruin." Ethan sat quietly in the corner, his hand gripping the edge of the table, his eyes fixed on the cold waffle in front of him. The frozen strawberries began to thaw, leaving dark red streaks on the stiff batter, like drops of blood soaking into the hardened surface. He looked up, observing the people in the diner. At the cashier, Tina, a woman in her 30s with her hair tied high, her face gaunt, held a ledger in one hand while rubbing her back with the other, her face wincing with each step. Each movement was slow, but her eyes still held the resilience of someone who had fought too hard just to stand there. By the coffee counter, Maya, the young woman who had been wiping tables since morning, was talking to an elderly customer. A smile rested on her lips, but her eyes were swollen, her hands trembling slightly as she held the coffee pot. When the customer left, Maya quietly sighed, wiping the corner of her eye before returning to work. Ethan saw Maya secretly checking her phone, the screen showing a smiling child with the words, "My reason to keep going" on the wallpaper. Maya touched the screen softly, her lips pressing together before slipping the phone into her pocket, continuing to carry trays of coffee, the tray shaking slightly in her hands. In the kitchen, Luis kept working, sweat soaking through his shirt, wiping his chin with the back of his hand before cutting meat without washing. The old meat was heavily seasoned to cover the faint smell starting to rise. Luis looked up, seeing Ethan watching through the kitchen window, and gave a cold laugh, muttering, "What are you looking at? Just eat and see for yourself." In a corner, a young busboy named Ryan, about 18, thin, wearing an old apron stained with ink, was carrying stacks of dirty dishes to the sink, stumbling under the weight. Sometimes Ryan would stand still for a moment, staring at the floor, taking a deep breath before moving again. Water ran, dishes clattered, the coffee machine hissed loudly, the bell above the door jingled and fell silent. There was no laughter, no cheerful greetings. This place felt like a sinking ship, with everyone on board struggling in silence, too afraid to call for help. Ethan closed his eyes, hearing the laughter of the past, the soft morning music, the customers laughing as they received their waffles, the quiet singing he and his co-workers shared while cleaning the kitchen. Suddenly, a loud crash broke the silence. Ryan had dropped a glass plate, shattering it across the floor. Panic filled Ryan's eyes as he knelt down, picking up the shards with trembling hands, blood dripping from a cut finger. Luis stormed out of the kitchen, yelling, "Ryan, what the hell is wrong with you? We're already short-staffed, and you're breaking dishes." Ryan bowed his head, his voice small. I'm sorry." Luis exhaled sharply, snatching the remaining tray of dishes from Ryan's hands, shoving him back so hard that Ryan nearly fell. Ethan stood up, walking over calmly, his voice steady. "It's all right. It's just a plate." Luis spun around, glaring. "Who are you? This has nothing to do with you." Ethan met his eyes, his voice low. "A plate isn't worth yelling at a kid." Luis snorted, waving him off. "If you want to be a hero, why don't you wash the dishes yourself?" Ethan didn't say another word. He knelt down beside Ryan, gently taking the boy's hand. using a napkin to wrap the cut as Ryan's eyes welled up. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," Ryan whispered. Ethan looked at him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder, speaking softly. "I know. It's okay. Everyone has tired days." Ryan nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks as he quickly turned away to wipe them. Ethan stood up, looking around the diner. He saw people who had been forgotten, pushed into dark corners, merely existing instead of living. He knew he had to do something, not just for the diner, but for these people. He pulled out his phone and sent a message. "Sarah, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Meet me at the diner. No meetings, no telling anyone. We're going to start cleaning up." Sarah replied with a single word, "Okay." Ethan took a deep breath, standing in the cold, tired diner, watching Maya give a faint smile as she saw a customer out the door, watching Ryan quietly wash his hands, watching Tina bend over from back pain, watching Luis sigh in the kitchen as he carried trays of meat. Tomorrow, this place would begin to change, even if it meant pain, even if it meant more breaking. Ethan knew he would begin to save the place that had once been the soul of his own life. That night, Ethan returned to the small roadside motel, the room cold, with the faint smell of old wood and disinfectant lingering in the air. He sat on the bed, hands clasped together, his chest heavy. The phone lay in front of him, the dark screen reflecting his face, a man who was tired, but with a firm light still burning in his eyes. He remembered every drop of sweat he shed when he first built the diner. He remembered the laughter of customers when the first waffle was placed on their table, the grateful looks of employees when they received their tips, the late nights spent closing the diner and wiping every chair and table for the morning to come. Those memories were now choked by images of Luis yelling at Ryan, Maya swallowing her tears, Tina groaning softly in pain, and the sound of dishes breaking on the floor. Ethan pressed the call button. Sarah answered, her voice sleepy. "Ethan, you're calling this late. Sarah, tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Cole's table. Bring the inventory records, the stock logs, the employee list, everything." Sarah was silent for a few seconds. "Ethan, what's going on?" "The diner is dying, Sarah, and we're going to save it, starting tomorrow. Are you sure this isn't just paperwork anymore?" "Ethan, this will mean letting people go, making changes, maybe hurting people." Ethan lifted his head, looking out the window where the last drops of rain were tapping softly on the metal roof. "I know, but if we don't do this, it will never be Cole's table again." Sarah sighed. "All right, I'll be there." Ethan hung up, laying back on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, his hand resting on his chest where his heart continued to beat, each beat a promise of determination. The next morning, the sky was unexpectedly clear after the night's rain, sunlight shining through the window, casting light on the Cole's table sign, its paint now peeling in small patches. Ethan put on his grey jacket, pulled down his hat, and walked into the diner, heading straight into the kitchen. No one recognized him as the owner. They just thought he was a man coming in to ask for a job as a dishwasher. Luis looked up at him, smirking. "What do you want?" "I'd like to wash dishes." "Do you need help?" Luis let out a sharp laugh. "Be my guest." Ethan quietly put on a pair of gloves, standing in front of a sink filled with dirty dishes, the smell of grease and dish soap stinging his nose. The water was ice cold, the dishes slippery in his hands, the soap bubbles white and thick, water splashing, knives clanging, voices calling out orders, Luis shouting, everything blended together while Ethan silently washed each dish. Listening to the whispers behind him, I heard Luis is thinking of quitting this week. Maya has a kid. It's tough for her. Tina's back is killing her, and she still has to stand all day. He heard every word, every sentence, etching them into his memory. At exactly 8 o'clock, the door to the diner swung open. Sarah walked in, arms full of paperwork, her eyes firm. Tina looked up. Maya flinched slightly. Luis glanced at Sarah, his voice sharp. "Who are you?" Sarah didn't answer, walking straight into the kitchen, dropping the inventory books on the table. "I'm here to check the stock and the books." Luis let out a mocking laugh. "Do you have a warrant for that?" Ethan took off his gloves, removed his hat and glasses, lifted his head, his eyes shining. "We don't need a warrant." Luis froze, eyes wide. Maya's mouth fell open. Tina covered her mouth in shock. Ethan stood in front of them, his voice calm but strong. "I am Ethan Cole. I'm the founder of Cole's Table." Silence. The entire diner went dead quiet. Ethan looked at each of them, his eyes serious but warm. "I came to see this place with my own eyes, to hear the truth with my own ears." Luis stuttered. I didn't know." Ethan raised his hand, cutting him off. "No explanations right now. We'll talk. But today, everything changes." He turned to Sarah. "Start checking the stock, the logs, the expiration dates, supplier invoices, shift schedules, work hours, everything." Sarah nodded and began working. Ethan turned to look at Maya, who was clutching her apron, tears welling in her eyes. He nodded gently to her, as if making a silent promise. "I will listen to your story." He looked at Ryan, who was hiding behind the counter, fear in his eyes. "I won't let you be yelled at unfairly anymore." He turned to Tina, seeing her nod softly, tears glistening in her eyes, as if finding a spark of hope again. That morning, the sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, casting light on Ethan's face, catching on the droplets of water still on his hands. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the diner breathe again, the place that was once his heart, once the dream of so many, and he knew. That morning, sunlight streamed through the wide-open window, casting soft golden lines across the cracked tiles of the diner floor, brushing over the chipped wooden tables, glistening on the droplets left on the counter. Ethan stood in the middle of the diner, sleeves rolled up, chest rising and falling, his eyes scanning every face. Maya wiping down the counter, Ryan carrying heavy trash bags outside, Tina checking which broken chairs needed replacing, Sarah holding a notebook, writing down everything that needed to be purchased, cleaned, or repaired. A diner, if it wants to live again, must start with cleaning up. Ethan opened the storage room. The smell of mold and old frozen meat, wilted vegetables, and pancake mix hard as stone hit him. He pulled up his mask, dragging out expired boxes, one bag, one container at a time, the clattering sounds echoing in the quiet space. Ryan walked in, seeing Ethan hauling out the old flower boxes, and hesitated. "Let me do that for you." Ethan turned back, smiling. "I need your help, Ryan." Ryan nodded softly, his eyes lighting up just a bit, and together they carried the old flower boxes out back, dumping them into the large trash bin, the flower dust floating in the sunlight. Out front, Maya was taking down each spice jar, wiping away the dust, reorganizing them one by one. The jars were sticky with grease, their bottoms stained, labels torn and peeling, but Maya patiently peeled them off, washed each jar clean, her eyes focused, her hands skillful, every movement gentle yet firm. Tina walked from table to table, gently shaking each chair, marking the ones that wobbled, wiping down each table edge, her eyes showing quiet determination, even as her back occasionally seized up, forcing her to clutch her hip and take a slow breath. Sarah wrote everything down. 5 chairs need to be replaced. 8 spice jars need to be restocked. 3 trash bins need to be replaced. Light above the counter is flickering. Ethan walked out front, seeing Maya crouched down, scrubbing the floor, sweat dotting her forehead. He handed her a paper towel, his eyes gentle. "You can take a break for a bit, Maya." Maya looked up, her eyes glistening, but she still smiled. "I'm okay. I want this place clean so that my child can be proud to walk in here." Ethan paused, looking deeply into her eyes, seeing himself years ago when he was young, dreaming of a place where people came not just to eat, but to feel respected. "Your child will be proud." "Maya," Ethan said firmly. At noon, they gathered around an old table. Sarah handed everyone a cup of water, tired hands gripping the cups, sweat still visible on rolled-up sleeves. Ethan stood. "Today is the first day we start over. I know you're all tired, have faced unfairness, and at some point thought about giving up. But I promise, from today, no one will have to be afraid to walk into work here." He looked around at each of them, his eyes steady. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves rest. And this diner deserves to live again. The sign outside the diner gently swayed in the breeze. Ryan raised his hand slightly. "Mr. Ethan, I've never seen an owner wash dishes with the staff." Ethan smiled, a spark of faith in his eyes. "I washed thousands of dishes before I opened my first diner. Ryan, a job doesn't make someone less than others. It's how we treat others that shows who we are." Maya nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. That afternoon, they continued their work. Sarah called suppliers, ordering fresh stock. Ethan posted a notice for hiring more staff, promising fair wages. Maya prepared fresh coffee for everyone, the rich aroma rising, replacing the stale, moldy scent of before. Ryan smiled as he carried out the last trash bags, the afternoon sun lighting up his young face. Tina sat to rest, rubbing her back, but her eyes glowed with hope. As the sun set, Cole's table was no longer a dark, tired diner. It became a place that was beginning to breathe again, to live again, to shine from the smallest actions. Ethan stepped outside, looking at the sign swinging in the breeze, taking a deep breath of the evening air, the scent of coffee, and the smell of fresh flour. In his heart, a phrase echoed, to save the soul of a place. You start with the people in it. The next morning, Cole's table opened earlier than usual. The crisp morning air breezed through the freshly cleaned windows, sunlight shining onto the wet wooden tables, reflecting in warm, bright patches. Ethan walked into the diner, holding a pot of fresh coffee, the scent of freshly roasted beans drifting warmly through the space. He set the pot on the counter, looking at the faces arriving as the clock struck 7. Ryan was first, paint still on his hands from fixing a broken chair the night before. Maya followed, her uniform smoother, her hair neatly tied, her eyes still tired but brighter. Tina came in next, holding her notebook, wearing the new back brace Ethan had bought for her, walking more steadily. Sarah stepped forward, holding her clipboard. Ethan, I've rechecked the entire inventory. I have the list. Ethan raised his hand. Today, no clipboards, no name tags, just us, human to human. They sat around the large wooden table near the window. Sunlight fell on their hands, on the steaming cups of coffee. Outside, early customers came in quietly, reading newspapers, sipping coffee, the faint smell of waffles wafting through the air. Ethan began, "Today, I want to hear from you. This is not about me talking, but about you speaking." No one answered immediately. Only the ticking of the clock filled the silence. Ryan hesitated, spinning his spoon in his coffee. "I don't know where to start." Ethan nodded, smiling. "Start with what bothers you the most." Ryan took a breath. "I'm scared of being yelled at, scared of making mistakes, scared of not being fast enough. I just want to learn, to do well. But sometimes I get so tired." His voice trembled. Ethan placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, his gaze soft. "I promise, no one will yell at you for those reasons anymore." Maya spoke, her voice hoarse. "I used to love this place, but slowly, every day felt like walking into a cold place. No one talked, no one smiled. I thought about quitting, but my child needs me to have this job." Her voice broke, tears welling in her eyes. Tina gently placed her hand over Maya's, giving a comforting squeeze. Tina cleared her throat. "I've been in this business for 15 years. I've seen diners turn into hellholes, dying slowly from indifference. I don't want Cole's table to be like that." She lifted her head, looking directly at Ethan. "If you really want to change, I'll stay." Ethan nodded, eyes glistening. "I don't just want to, I will." Sarah read from her notebook. "We need more staff, retraining on how to make waffles, how to serve customers, fixing the parking lot light so Maya isn't afraid when leaving at night. And we need laughter here again." Ethan stood, walking around the table, looking at each person. "I once dreamed of this place as somewhere customers walk in and feel warmth, leaving with a smile. I believed the staff here would find pride in serving a cup of coffee, a plate of waffles." He stopped, placing his hand on Tina's shoulder. "I forgot that dream. But today, I want to live it again with all of you." He looked at Maya. "You can smile while working. Not because you're afraid of losing your job, but because you feel joy. At Ryan, you can learn, make mistakes, fix them without fear. And at Sarah, and I need you to help me keep this promise to them. Sarah smiled, nodding. The meeting ended in warm silence. Ryan stood first, running to the kitchen to prep the dishwashing area. Maya walked to the counter, adjusting the sugar jar, wiping it down once more. Tina stepped to the door, greeting a new customer with a gentle smile, something she hadn't done in a long time. Ethan stood at the doorway, looking out at the street, taking a deep breath. The morning breeze carried the scent of freshly made waffles, freshly brewed coffee, the scent of a morning beginning. In his heart, a new beat echoed, "This is Cole's table." That day, the Montana sky was a deep blue, sunlight pouring down onto the awning of Cole's table, reflecting off the signs swaying in the breeze. Ethan stood outside, holding a cup of hot coffee, watching customers come and go, listening to the bell on the door ring softly, each chime like a heartbeat reminding him of today's mission. Today, Ethan was no longer observing. He was holding himself accountable. Stepping inside, Ethan saw Ryan at the dish station, sleeves rolled up, eyes focused as he washed each glass, the sound of water running, dishes clinking softly. The boy's face dotted with sweat, but his eyes no longer filled with fear. Ethan placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "You're doing great." Ryan turned, his eyes lighting up, smiling. "I'm learning how to stack the glasses so they don't break anymore." At the counter, Maya greeted customers with a real smile, her eyes still tired but filled with trust. She gave a small bow as she handed over a menu. "Wishing you a warm morning at Cole's table." An older customer nodded, smiling. The atmosphere here feels different today. In the kitchen, Ethan saw Tina showing Ryan how to organize utensils after a shift, her eyes serious yet gentle. When you keep things tidy, you won't drop things or slip. Just like in life, when you keep it organized, you won't feel scared. Ryan nodded, his eyes bright. "I understand now." Sarah walked in with her clipboard. "Ethan, the pantry has been cleaned, and the supplier has agreed to deliver fresh produce early in the mornings instead of late afternoons." Ethan nodded. "Good, Sarah. But today, I want to check on trust." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Ethan didn't answer, simply smiled and walked to the counter. He poured a cup of fresh coffee, set it on the counter, and called Maya over. "Maya, come here." She stepped over, eyes curious. "Tell me, if you had a chance to work somewhere else tomorrow with higher pay, would you leave?" Maya hesitated, clutching her apron. "I used to think about leaving, Ethan, but today, when I saw you cleaning the counter, saw Ryan learning to wash dishes, saw Tina smiling at customers, I realized." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I don't want to leave anymore. I want to stay because I want this place to truly become a home." Ethan smiled, nodding. "That's all I needed." He turned to Sarah. "See, it's not about checking the pantry, but about checking hearts." Sarah let out a soft laugh, exhaling deeply. Suddenly, A well-dressed middle-aged man walked in, shiny shoes, expensive clothes, holding his phone, speaking loudly. "I'm at Cole's table, the worst diner I visited last week." Maya flinched, stepping back, fear in her eyes. Ryan froze, looking at Ethan. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes steady. "Excuse me, sir, what do you need?" The man glanced at Ethan, smirking. "Oh, the owner. Last time the service was slow, the food was cold. I had to complain. Let's see how it is today." Ethan held his calm gaze. "Today, you will be served as a guest if you respect the people working here." The man narrowed his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ethan placed his hand on the counter. "You can complain about the food, but you will not insult the staff. Here, we don't accept that." The diner fell silent. Maya stood in the back, her hands trembling slightly, eyes wet. Ryan gripped a towel tightly, standing behind the counter, waiting for what would happen next. The man was silent for a few seconds, then let out a cold laugh. "All right, bring me a hot coffee and a waffle." Ethan nodded. "Maya, please get that ready for him." Maya took a breath, stepping forward, her voice calm. "Yes, 1 hot coffee and a waffle." In that moment, no one said a word, but everyone felt it. A boundary had been set. As Tina walked past Ethan, she smiled. "You just taught them how to demand respect." Ethan nodded slightly, a spark of faith in his eyes. "We start with the small things like this." A hot waffle was brought out, the smell of butter rich and warm, golden and crisp on the outside, soft on the inside, nothing like the cold, lifeless waffle Ethan had seen on his first day back. The man took the first bite, nodding. "It's better now." Maya smiled softly, her eyes no longer filled with fear, but with confidence. That day, Cole's table truly changed. Not just because the food was better, not just because the pantry had been reorganized, but because everyone had found their sense of dignity, trust, mutual respect, and genuine smiles. 3 weeks passed since the day Ethan decided to save Cole's table, and the small diner on the street in Montana seemed to have taken on a new soul. That morning, sunlight streamed through the freshly replaced window, shining onto the polished wooden tables. The scent of freshly ground coffee mixed with the warmth of hot waffles in the air, clearing away the damp, stale smell that had clung to the diner for years. Ethan stood behind the counter, wearing an apron, making coffee himself, smiling as customers walked in. Old Mr. James, the regular who used to complain about cold waffles, came in again, leaning on his cane, nodding at Maya. "Sweetheart, get me a hot coffee with a little sugar today." Maya smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Mr. James, today the waffles are even hotter than the coffee." The old man burst out laughing, the sound ringing brightly in a space that had once been silent. In the kitchen, Ryan stood next to Tina, carefully flipping waffles on the griddle. Tina looked at him, her voice low but filled with pride. "You're doing great, Ryan. Even no burnt edges." Ryan smiled, his hands still trembling a bit. "It's because you showed me how. I never thought I could make waffles." Tina patted his shoulder lightly. "You're capable of more than you think." Sarah walked in, carrying an envelope, her eyes a mix of happiness and worry. "Ethan, there's a letter from headquarters." Ethan wiped his hands, opened the letter, his eyes scanning each line, his brows furrowing. Maya, Ryan, and Tina all stopped what they were doing, looking at him, the air seeming to freeze. Ethan took a deep breath, his voice steady. "They want to close down Cole's table." The room went silent. Only the ticking of the clock could be heard, heavy like everyone's heartbeat. Maya stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Why?" Ethan set the letter down on the counter. Sales from the last 3 months were too low. They want to cut losses and shut down this location. Ryan clenched his fists, his eyes turning red. I don't want to leave." Tina leaned against the counter, her voice firm. "No way. We've just gotten this place back on its feet. We can't let it die again." Ethan looked at each of them, his voice slow but resolute. "We have 1 week to prove that Cole's table deserves to stay open." Sarah nodded. "We'll show them that this place isn't just a store, it's a part of the community." The plan was drawn up right there on the counter. Maya created a list of regular customers to invite them back. Ryan took on the job of handing out flyers at the park, inviting people to Cole's table, promising a free coffee to the first customer each morning. Tina reached out to the local church, inviting seniors in need for a free breakfast. Ethan called the suppliers, requesting fresh ingredients, promising prompt payment. Sarah went online, posting photos of the diner, sharing the story of Cole's table's fight to survive, calling on the community to support them. On the first day of their crucial week, the diner opened at 6:30 a.m. Ryan dashed around, bringing waffles directly to customers' cars. Maya stood at the counter, smiling brightly, brewing coffee non-stop. Tina worked in the kitchen, flipping waffles while teaching Ryan how to plate them beautifully. Sarah sat in a corner with her laptop, updating social media, replying to customers asking for the address. Ethan stepped back a little, watching them all, his eyes glistening as he saw Maya smiling, Ryan dashing around the diner, Tina smiling warmly at customers, and Sarah giving a thumbs up as the post's shares hit 1,000. A young customer came up to the counter. "I read the story about your diner online. I'm here to support you. 1 waffle and a black coffee, please." Maya smiled, her eyes shimmering. "Thank you. You won't be disappointed." That entire day, there wasn't an empty seat in the diner. Waffles sold out by 3 p.m. Coffee was brewed continuously, and customers left with smiles and promises to return. That evening, Ethan locked up the diner, standing under the Montana starry sky, taking a deep breath. Sarah stepped out, handing him the day's sales report, 3 times higher than our previous best day. Ethan smiled softly, his eyes wet. "We're doing it." But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. To truly save Cole's table, they needed to sustain this change, not just for a week, but forever, turning this place into a home of kindness, trust, and second chances for anyone who walked through its doors. And that night, in Ethan's heart, the flame was reignited. For 6 days straight, Cole's table was lit from dawn until the town fell asleep. Ryan was no longer the trembling boy afraid of breaking glasses. He now moved around the diner confidently, apron neat, smiling as he served coffee, learning how to chat with customers, learning how to listen. Maya no longer bowed her head when customers yelled. She smiled calmly, handling every situation with steady eyes and a soft but firm voice. At Cole's table, we are always ready to listen to feedback, but please speak with respect. Tina, who once silently endured back pain just to keep her job, now smiled freely, fairly organizing shifts, teaching Ryan how to check waffle batter, reminding Maya to drink water, and sometimes standing by the door, watching everyone with the warm gaze of a quiet guardian. Sarah, with her old laptop, sat in the corner, typing away, posting stories and videos of customers laughing while eating hot waffles, sharing small stories about Ryan, Maya, and Tina, and the community began to notice. On the 7th day, the final day before headquarters made its decision, Ethan arrived at the diner at 4 a.m. He walked to each table, touching the smooth wood, smelling the fresh waffle batter, breathing in the scent of freshly brewed coffee. His heart beat strongly, just like the days when he first opened the diner 10 years ago. Ethan knew that today would decide not just the fate of Cole's table, but also the futures of Maya, Ryan, and Tina, who had placed all their hopes in this place. At 6:00 a.m., customers began arriving. The crowd was larger than usual, drawn in by Sarah's post, by returning regulars, and by newcomers curious about why a small diner was being defended by an entire community. Ryan worked the counter, serving drinks, bussing tables, smiling constantly. Maya brought hot waffles directly to a struggling senior's table, while Tina brewed coffee, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion, but still smiling. Ethan stepped into the kitchen, personally flipping each waffle, dusting them with powdered sugar, carefully placing strawberries on top, his eyes lighting up each time he saw a customer smile when receiving their plate. That afternoon, a man in a suit walked in, his face stern. It was Mark, the regional manager. The diner buzzed with conversation and laughter, the scent of waffles wafting through the air, every seat filled. Mark looked around, frowning, then walked to the counter. "I need to see Ethan." Ethan wiped his hands, stepped out, and shook Mark's hand. "Hello, Mark. I assume you're here for the review." Mark looked at him, his voice firm. "I've seen the reports, but I needed to see it for myself." Ethan nodded. "Take your time." Mark walked around the diner, watching Ryan clearing tables, bowing politely to customers, watching Maya gently checking in on an elderly woman as she poured coffee, watching Tina hand a meal to a homeless man seated quietly in the corner. Mark returned, asking sales. Sarah stepped forward, handing over the report. "We've reached 4 times the average sales of last month." Mark flipped through the report, silent for a moment. Suddenly, a customer near the door spilled their coffee, liquid spreading across the floor. Ryan rushed over. "It's okay, sir. Let me clean that up." He quickly wiped the floor, smiling. "Are you all right?" "Sir, no burns." The customer shook his head, smiling gratefully. "Thank you, young man." Mark watched, his eyes softening. Ethan stepped forward, looking at Mark. Mark. Cole's Table isn't just a diner. It's hope. It's a second chance. It's a place where someone like Ryan learns confidence, where Maya can provide for her child with honest work, where the community finds warmth. Mark looked at Ethan and sighed. I can see that. As the afternoon light faded and the last customer left, Ethan and everyone sat quietly around the large wooden table. Tina placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, and Maya smiled, exhausted but happy. Sarah looked up at Ethan and gave a small nod. Mark stood at the door, turned back, his voice firm but warm. I'll report to headquarters that Cole's Table needs to stay open. In that moment, the entire diner seemed to burst with silent joy. Ryan turned to Maya. Did we really do it? Maya nodded softly, tears falling as she smiled. We did it. Ethan looked at them, his eyes red as he lifted his gaze to the ceiling, letting out a long breath, heavy yet relieved. We saved Cole's Table. That day, as the sunset bathed the diner's sign in gold, Ethan knew everything would never be the same again. Cole's Table didn't just survive, it was reborn. 3 days after Mark left, headquarters sent a short email. Cole's Table will continue operations. We acknowledge the changes. Continue proving your worth. Ethan read the email, sitting alone in the diner before opening hours. Outside, the morning fog still blanketed the small Montana town, the yellow glow of streetlights reflecting on the glass door. Where his reflection stood a man with hair now streaked with grey, tired eyes, but filled with faith. He remembered the days he once stood alone in a cramped kitchen, mixing waffle batter by hand, washing each glass, arranging each chair. He remembered the eyes of his first customers, the smiles as they bit into a warm, crisp waffle, the sweat trickling down his spine the first time he heard the doorbell ring. And now, after everything, Cole's Table wasn't just being kept alive, it had come back to life. The bell above the door jingled. Ryan was the first to walk in, carrying a cup of hot tea, setting it down in front of Ethan. You need to drink this. Ethan looked up, smiling softly. Thank you, Ryan. Ryan sat down across from him, scratching his head. I never thought I'd like this job before. I just thought I needed the money, needed to survive. Now, I want to do it well because it makes me happy to see people smile. Ethan knew Cole's Table might never be the richest diner, and it might not be the busiest, but it would be the place where people who needed a second chance found faith again. A place where a single mother could provide for her child with dignity. A place where a young man who once trembled in fear could find confidence. A place where a woman who once endured silently could smile again. And a place where a man who once was tired and lost could find a reason to live, to keep fighting for what is right. Ethan opened his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for giving me another chance to start over." He locked the door to the diner and stepped out onto the quiet street. The sound of his footsteps light, no longer heavy like those first days. Above the Montana sky, the stars sparkled like silent promises that tomorrow, Cole's Table would open again, welcoming new customers, new smiles, new hopes, because where there is hope, there is life. Cole's table would always be the place where hearts found each other, where humanity was restored, where people would remember that if just one person believes, even the smallest flame is enough to light up an entire dark room.